Good evening. Welcome to Chasing the Facts. I'm Sam Chase, your host, and our guest for this show is Patricia Dzuris, who is Chelmsford's town clerk. So, Trish, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Sam.
Glad to have you on. And we ask every guest to just give us a very, very brief biographical sketch, and maybe in your case a little bit about your progression within town government that ultimately led to you taking over the town clerk's job.
Okay, sure thing. Well, I'm a 49-year resident of Chelmsford and a CHS graduate, and I have the mother of one amazing daughter, and I have 4 dogs, so it's just me and the dogs in the house at this time.
They're all registered, right?
They're all registered first thing, absolutely. And everybody in my family is registered as well. My background is mostly business and sales, and I came from working for a manufacturer's rep company in the beauty field, believe it or not. So, and then I stayed home with my daughter for a while, and then in 2005, I started working in the sewer department at the town of Chelmsford. And the reason why I was able to get that job was because I had worked with the DPW on several community projects, one of them being Varney Playground. And so I got to know Jim Pearson a little bit. So when I needed to get back to work, I wanted to stay close to home. Sewer department was available. I said, sure, that's perfect. I get to stay home. And then I was there for 2 years and then worked in the town manager's office for 10 years before I became the assistant town clerk right the very first week of early voting for the November election. And then I took over for my dear friend Honorina Maloney in June of 2017 as the town clerk.
And there wasn't too much of a time lag between the time that you started to work in the town clerk's office and the time you actually became town clerk. And
it was a little shocking.
Yes, it was somewhat of a baptism by fire.
Yes,
but your background leading up to that certainly must have helped. I mean, all the years in the town manager's office and getting the exposure to just the overall process of how the town operates. I'm sure that
and
was
collaborating with the other departments and that made a big difference.
Well, that's great. What I find in talking to people in the town is very few people actually know what a town clerk does and why the job is necessary. So perhaps we could talk a little bit about that.
There are so many tasks that the town clerk's office is responsible for. 90% of what we do is mandated by Mass General Law. There's over 450 different functions that are supervised by the town clerk in Mass General Law. So there's a lot, and much of it it sounds very boring. You know, it's very administrative, a lot of record keeping, filing, certifying. We do issue the licenses. The dog licenses is a huge part of what we do at the beginning of every year. We issue the town census. Every year, we facilitate elections, which is, again, one of the biggest parts of my job is being the chief election official for the town. The public records compliance officer as well for the town. And we issue raffle permits, and we swear in elected and appointed officials and administer the oath of office for all elected and appointed officials, as well as like the police department, the fire department. We issue the oath for the assessor as well. So there's a lot of different functions that we do. We track all of those appointments as well. So we have to make sure everybody complies with the conflict of interest and the open meeting law. We're not the police, but we have to make sure that we give the information to everybody as they pull nomination papers before each election, and we have to just make sure that everybody has done their ethics training. So all of that minutia needs to be tracked by someone. So who better but the town clerk?
Just the mere fact, and having participated in Chelmsford local elections for many, many years, I do understand pretty much how the process works. I mean, certainly not to the degree that you do as town clerk, but I have a pretty good overview of it. And just the fact that your office administers not just the local election, but every election, state, primary and federal elections is it's a tremendous job and a tremendous administrative undertaking. And people, I don't think, could possibly realize how much effort is required, how much coordination is required, unless they actually have an opportunity to work in that process, which they do. So maybe we could talk a little bit about that. Can you explain, just take us through, very briefly, through a typical setup of a typical election, just the processes that you might go through in terms of getting people to come and work for you and things of that nature.
Okay, it's very cyclical. So every year you pretty much do the same things. You just do it more often if you have more elections in a year. So it doesn't matter how big or small the election is. The process of setting it up is exactly the same. So for me, I start preparing for an election really right at the beginning of our fiscal year by I have to put together some information for the state auditor, estimating the cost of a particular state election per se, and then I have to submit that so that we can get some reimbursement for our state elections. So that starts like in June. And then of course we're always recruiting our election workers constantly because they cycle through as time goes on. We have to put together a political calendar. That's usually done by November of the previous year so that we know what all the deadlines are, right from the very first day of the year when nomination papers are available to the deadlines for filing, for submitting, pulling those papers, for submitting those papers to the registrars for certification, and for voter registration deadlines. All of those things, again, are dictated by Mass General Law, and there's certain days in advance, so you have to count back from the election to certain days for different deadlines. So that political calendar is then kind of our Bible for the year on what we need to do for the rest of that year. So for 2020, we actually been preparing for this year all of last year because we know with 4 elections in 1 year, it's very busy, and we don't have a lot of time.
4 elections and a census.
4 elections, and not only our annual census, but our
census.
U.S. federal
Right.
decennial census as well. So that's kind of, we pass the information out there. We don't facilitate that particular function. We're not federal government employees, but we are required, I'm on the Census Count Committee, we are required to make sure that even last year, did a lot of preparations with the addresses. So we work in conjunction with our GIS coordinator, with our community development office to make sure we anticipate all of the housing units that might be populated by April 1st of 2020. So we put all that information together well in advance so that the U.S. Census Bureau has all that information and can compare it, and we can get the maps as accurate as possible. So then now with the U.S. Census Bureau, we're partnering with them to get the word out that they're seeking enumerators. So we're trying to help them with the recruiting of election workers. And we've got a kickoff event that Tina Govea has put together, and the House Redistricting Committee will be present February 7th at the CCA at 10:30 in the morning. So that's kind of our U.S. federal census kickoff event. But while that's going on, all of our wonderful citizens are returning their annual census forms for the town. So we're buried in that at the moment with all the dog licensing forms coming in simultaneously. So there's just a lot going on
It's
in
a
the
busy
office
time
at the
of year
moment.
for you
Nomination papers are going out and coming in, and we're certifying signatures, and we've also got automatic voter registration, which was implemented January 1st of this year.
How does that work?
It means everybody in the state of Massachusetts that is eligible to vote is automatically registered to vote. And so that comes through anytime they interact with any agency, the DMV, Mass Health, any other state agency, it automatically puts them in the system, in the queue. So every day when Jennifer gets to her desk, Jennifer Almeida is our voter registration coordinator, thank God for her every day, she sits down and a queue comes up through these state agencies, and she has to go through that queue and look at every single registered voter and accept them, certify them, and then we send them an acknowledgement notice. So it's been a lot busier. That's been a lot busier as well, just because so many more people are in the queue every day.
So we have the automatic, and again, I admit ignorance
Yeah.
on this particular
Yeah.
subject. I've read a little bit about it, but I
Yeah.
don't really understand it. So we have the automatic voter registration. But it still sounds to me, based on what you just said, it sounds to me like your office still has to essentially qualify these people.
Absolutely.
So although we have the automatic voter registration, the qualifications for an individual to be a voter have not changed. Is that
That is
accurate?
correct.
Okay,
That is
all
correct.
right.
Yeah, that is correct.
Right.
We just have to, a lot of times they're coming through because they've interacted with this state agency and they might already be
Right.
in our system, whether they're a registered voter in our system or not. But we have to go through and compare, our existing data with the data that's coming in.
I would guess that most probably are if they're Chelmsford residents.
Most of them are, yeah.
Right,
And every
right.
now and then you get that student who just turned 18 and it's great.
Exactly.
Then we go, oh, new registrant. So, in a lot of ways it's good. It's just that it's right now it's busy. It's on top of everything
Well,
else.
plus
that we're
it's a
doing.
new process, and it's
Yeah.
going to take a while probably for your folks to get accustomed to that. As good as Jen is, and I know she is,
Yes.
she's
Everybody
excellent.
in my office is phenomenal.
Yeah,
and
you
they
have
work- they
a
work like
wonderful
dogs.
you have a wonderful staff.
Don't I?
Really.
Yeah.
You absolutely do.
Yes, I do. Thank God for them. But also, what the state has decided to implement and have the deadline be October 2020 is the Real ID, which is also increases our foot traffic for everybody who needs copies of their birth certificates, copies of their marriage certificates. All of our vital records requests have been increased because of the Real ID. So that deadline, everybody who, when you go to renew your license, they're all supposed to have this Real ID now, and in order to get that, you need certain documentation.
Right.
So that's created a little extra traffic in our office as well.
Busy time.
Mm-hmm.
Busy time. We do have a local election coming up, and I was taking a look at the town website the other day just to see where we are in terms of people seeking office. So why don't we talk a little bit about that process, and maybe we can explain to the folks in the audience how they, as Chelmsford citizens, can get involved in town politics, elective politics. We can start with the town meeting.
Okay.
We have in this town, we have what is known as a representative town meeting form of government, so maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Certainly. We have 9 precincts in town, based on 2010 census data. And each of the 9 precincts has 18 reps. Of those 18 reps, 6 are up every year at a local election.
A third of the precinct turns over every year.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Until we have to do this all again when the 2020
Maybe that's
census
why
data
some of them.
comes out.
Maybe that's why some of them think they're senators. No,
So as of right now, so we send out in December, we send out notices, letters of intent to all of our incumbents. And all they have to do is just say, yes, I want to keep my seat. They send in their letter of intent, and we mark them down as an incumbent, and they are done. They don't have to go out and get signatures. If they don't return their letter, then they're not automatically on the ballot, which means it's an open seat. So any resident within that precinct can come in, and nomination papers are always available the first work day in January. And town meeting reps only need 25 certified signatures from their precinct. So it's a great way to meet your neighbors. You just grab the nomination papers, you get a map, you get a street listing, you go knocking on your neighbor's doors and say hello. Everybody's going to sign your papers because it's just
it doesn't take very long.
it doesn't take very long. And we recommend that they get, at least 35 or 40, just because you want to make sure that they actually are registered voters within your precinct. So
Or that the signature is legible.
yes,
Right.
that's true too. That's
So,
true too.
right.
We have to be able to decipher what that signature is.
So that's a very simple process, and it does take a little bit of time, and it does involve some initiative on the part of the citizen who wants to get involved. But in looking at the web page just the other day, and I've got the numbers here, as Trish said, we have 9 precincts, and so far we have 8, 10, we have 19 openings. Among the 9 precincts. And what strikes me is, as of this date, it appears that a lot of the incumbents have not returned their letters. And my experience is that most people who are incumbents The letters, Trish will send the letters out at the end of December, and most people within 2 or 3 weeks get their letters back. That's been my experience. Not to say that people don't wait till the last minute, I'm sure some do, but at this point, we're 22 January, and we have 19 openings, and that an awful lot of folks have not returned their incumbency letter, which is very interesting, and I don't know if it's too early to read anything into that at this point. But,
well, I think that also we have to keep in mind at the last town meeting, we recognized many, many 30-year town meeting rep veterans. Many of those feel like they've done their time.
Well, I
and
think
are
so.
leaving it up.
I
So,
think so.
a lot of those people are not re-upping, but some of them are. And again, God bless them for doing that for so long. But Precinct 2 and Precinct 4, I'm putting an extra little push out to.
Yeah.
Those are the two precincts that really need.
You've got 4 holes there.
We've got 4 holes in 2 and 4 holes in
Right.
4. So those are the two precincts that have the biggest gap right now.
So I think the town clerk has just made a pitch, folks. You know, step up, and if you have any doubt about the process, give the office a call. They'll explain it to you again, and come on in and pick up your nomination papers. And we really need to have a full complement of reps at town meeting, and it's good if, you know, if we can get a diversity of thought and opinion, and it's a good way to get yourselves involved in the local political process.
And you get a vote on what's going on.
And you get a say.
Exactly.
Basically, the town meeting, the representative town meeting, is the town's legislative arm.
Exactly.
So it's the same thing as the United States Congress on a smaller scale. The town puts forth warrant articles, which in effect is legislation or laws, and the town meeting gets to make those decisions.
162 people
162
make all the
people.
decisions in town.
You know, the town manager presents a budget in the springtime, and the town meeting does not have to vote for the town manager's budget. Now, I only remember one time in my tenure that that's happened, but it can happen, okay? So the notion that it's all foregone conclusion or a rigged system or anything like that, if you want to think that way, I'm not going to argue with you, but the fact of the matter is that the power of the legislative effort in town rests with the town meeting members. And if they decide they're going to exercise independent judgment or go in a different direction, they can do it. So it's a very responsible and important position. So that's town meeting. Now, moving on to the other elective offices in town. We've got Board of Selectmen, School Committee, Moderator, Planning Board, Board of Health, Library Trustees, Cemetery Commission, and Housing Authority.
Yeah.
And there are, as of January 22nd, there are no contests.
No contests at all. Nope.
None.
And we are still looking for 3 library, there's 2 library trustees to pull papers. So that's, at least we've got a slate for everything else, assuming everybody comes back.
You know
and
the jobs are all going to
certified.
be filled.
Exactly.
Right, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Now, in case anybody thinks that this is some sort of an unusual situation, it may be a little bit unusual for Chelmsford, but if you look at some of the surrounding towns, this is not uncommon. That a lot of the offices, even the major boards such as Selectmen, School Committee, and Planning Board, very often have uncontested seats. And whether that means people are satisfied with the incumbents or...
That's what I like to think.
I hope that's the case.
I like to think that it's that they're satisfied.
But almost anybody who runs for office will, their public comment is, well, you know, this isn't a good thing, and I mean, I really shouldn't run unopposed, and I ought to have opposition. You know what? You're glad nobody's against you.
Well, yeah, 'cause then you don't have to raise as much money to campaign.
Let's just be
and-
honest.
Yeah.
That's just basic human nature, and I don't fault anybody for thinking that way.
And then we don't have to get all strict. You're going to
Right.
say, keep the campaigning and electioneering
Right.
away from my polling locations.
And you know, I guess I sort of agree with that philosophy on an occasional basis. But I don't ever want to see a situation where we go 5, 6, 10 years and nothing is ever contested.
yeah.
That is not good for the town. It
And
just
that has
isn't.
not happened.
No, and that won't
Yeah,
happen.
Yeah,
that
that
won't
has not
happen.
happened. So
You have
not
an
unusual.
you have an absence of any burning issue this year, I think. You know, in years where you have an override question, that tends to bring people out,
Yeah.
and people have to voice an opinion one way or the other on that, and you get candidates that support the position or not. But I don't think there's anything like that this year, okay, to draw people out.
Nope.
So,
Not this year. But before we even go on to I know we're busy
go ahead.
collecting nomination papers for the local election. We are getting ready for our presidential primary, which takes place before that.
Yes.
March 3rd.
March
Is
3rd.
our presidential primary. The deadline to register to vote for the president in the presidential primary is February 12th. It's really easy to register to vote. You can come in the office, you can pick up a form, you can go on the Secretary of State's website. Really easy to register to vote. Also, we do have early voting for the March presidential primary.
talk about that a little bit. Describe that process.
Okay, well, this year we're doing it a little different. First of all, the state said
good.
we don't have to have extended hours. So early voting will take place the last week in February, from Monday, February 24th through Friday, February 28th, but just during regular business hours at town offices. So rather than, staying open on Saturdays and us having to work all weekend and sorting out early voted ballots, normal business hours, you can come in anytime, Monday 8:30 to 4, Tuesday 8:30 to 7, Wednesday 8:30 to 4, Thursday 8:30 to 4, or Friday 8:30 to 1 on Friday, only 1 o'clock. And then we close the doors, and anybody who hasn't voted early, get to the polls or get your absentee ballot in. So that'll take place in the gymnasium. So we're telling everybody, if you're coming to town offices to vote early, park in the back. Do not even park in the front, because it's really hard to get from the front of the building all the way down to the gym. So we don't want anybody, all those stairwells. So just park in the back. We're going to have extra handicap parking in the back for this purpose. If you see scaffolding on the back stairs, you still come in. We're redoing the roof, so it's safe. Still, yeah. But we'll make it as presentable as possible. But just park in the back, come right into the gym, and we're going to have plenty of voting booths available. A whole election team will be there, ready and waiting to service the public. Also, when we're processing the early voted ballots this year, instead of all those early voted ballots having to be put in order by precinct and brought to the polls on election day, our town offices is going to be a central tabulation facility. So those ballots will never leave the town offices. They're just going to come right from our vault by precinct. We have a separate election team, warden, clerks, checkers, check in, check out, ballot box attendant, extra tabulators and ballot boxes. And by precinct, we're going to put the memory cards in. We're going to process all of those ballots right there at town offices, precinct by precinct by precinct. Which means
it's going to be so much better.
It is going to be better, but everybody waiting at the polling locations with bated breath isn't going to get the actual unofficial results until we tally those tapes together.
I think that's a reasonable trade-off, because the final tally is always available by 8:45.
Yeah, it'll be on the website as soon as we add those tapes together. It'll be there.
You're talking a slight delay, and the early voting prior to this change that you just told us about, what used to happen, as Trish said, they would hold the ballots in reserve until the actual election day. And then they would take, for example, all the Precinct 1 ballots, they would physically take those ballots to Precinct 1, and then the poll workers would have to put them through the machines as if the people were right there at the polls voting at that time, and they would go through the check-off process. I think that's very confusing.
Yeah, we still have to do that, even at the central tabulation facility,
right.
But there's no other voters there in between.
That's what you still have to go through that process.
Right.
And it still has to be done on the day of the actual election.
Yes, it still has to be done on election day, yeah.
But, as you say, it's more controlled.
Yeah.
And I would guess that what you would do is you'd say, okay, let's start. All right, give me all the Precinct 1s.
Absolutely.
And then you'd shove all the Precinct 1s through, and then 2, and so forth.
And then we take out the memory card out of the tabulator after we basically are opening and closing the polls for every precinct. We're running it through everything.
Okay.
And then if any early voted mail-in ballots come in after that precinct has been done, then those go to the polls, just like if an absentee ballot comes into the town.
Are you going to do the absentees the same way, or is that?
No, we can't. The absentee ballots all go to the polls.
That has to follow the previous process.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
But, this probably isn't a bad time to change, because I would guess the state primary unfortunately, you're not going to have a very large voter turnout. Is that true?
No,
or-
I think we're going to have an okay.
What do we usually get
like
for percentage?
50,
Oh, we get that
yeah,
high?
Yeah, we
on-
do.
okay,
Yeah,
okay.
for the
I'm
last.
wrong.
Yeah, the last. Let's see. September primary, March presidential primary in 2016, we had a 50.7%
That's
voter
pretty
turnout.
good.
Yeah,
That's pretty good.
So,
All right, so you are going to be very
yeah,
busy with that.
we are.
And so your typical early voting percentage, as a percentage of that total number, would be what? How many people vote?
Let's see, what was our percentage? 25% is what vote in November. 25% of our voters in November voted early.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot. That was my first week on the job. Don't forget.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
That was fun. So yeah, so the primary is really what we're focusing on right now, and getting all the early voting scenarios all laid out. How we want the signing, making sure that we have clear, visible signage.
Right.
Make sure we get the message out to everybody. Hello, we do have a March primary coming up on the 3rd. Vote Tuesday. We're going to get all our Vote Tuesday banners and signs out on the Wednesday after, the Wednesday before the election. And then more lawn signs and things like that. The Board of Selectmen really want to see more of a push to create more public awareness about
Right.
all of our elections. So we're just increasing our signage and trying to push out on social media.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
And the more awareness that you can create, the better off everybody is.
Yeah.
We want to have people participate in the elections. Hopefully they're informed people, and that's not to say they should be of one mind or another, but they should hopefully make some effort to avail themselves of whatever the facts are, surrounding the candidates and the issues and so forth. So that's great. Well, we've got about 3 minutes left, Trish. This goes very quickly,
Yeah.
half-hour format, and we haven't talked too much about the censuses. So maybe in the last 3 minutes or so, we could do a little bit about that.
About just the difference between the local
Yeah,
census and
the local census, the federal census, and how the town clerk is involved in that process.
Okay. Well, the local census we do every year, as I said before, and that's the one that comes to the town. We ask that you respond within 10 days, but
That's a mail out to all?
it's a mail out to
Okay.
every household in town, and it lists every resident that we have on our records, and we ask that you send it back in. Even if you uncover it in your junk mail 6 months from now, if you find your census form, send it in. What that does is it keeps people active on the voter list. It also gives us the data we need to produce our mandated annual street listing every year. So we do ask that people pay very close attention to that annual town census and send it in. Again, we've gotten some 2019 census forms in with the 2020 census form. We're happy to have it.
That's okay.
Yeah, exactly. So that's every year, and it does enable you to prove your residency as required by the RMV for senior housing and veterans benefits as well. The U.S. Census is every 10 years, and that is really there's a lot of different things they use the data for, but there's $675 billion of federal money that needs to be dispersed to all the cities and towns across the country. So if we don't get every single person counted in our community, we're not getting our fair share of that
And it
funding.
isn't just voters. It's anybody that actually resides in the town.
Absolutely.
Is counted.
Yeah, everybody, as of April 1st, where are you? Where are you living on April 1st? That person needs to be counted. Whether you are in a single-family home, if you're in an apartment, if you're living under a bridge, if you're away at college, wherever you are in this country on April 1st is where you need to be counted. So it also provides data for fair representation, which I know is very important in Chelmsford. So that's how they determine how many state reps you get.
Right.
Is based on the census. I don't exactly know how it works.
When I was a kid, Massachusetts had 16.
State reps?
Well, 14 congressmen and 2 senators. So now we're down to what is it?
We've got four.
No, I'm talking
Oh,
about at
sorry.
the federal level.
Oh, federal level.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, this even determines our local
Exactly.
state reps as well.
Exactly,
So,
and it
Yeah.
determines on how the precinct lines are going to be drawn for the town elections. So it's
Right.
very, very important. So you get that census form, folks. Please respond. Very important.
Yeah,
It's
both of them.
dollars for Chelmsford.
yes, exactly. And we will be recruiting enumerators if anybody wants information on that. They can
Great.
go to U.S. Census Bureau.